Um, everybody, can everybody hear me? And as I say every time we connect by Zoom, please make sure if you want to ask a question, make a point, raise your hand, and I don't always pick them up so quickly. So let's just make sure everybody's still connected. Any apologies for today's meeting?
Just one from Helen's, maybe 10 minutes late.
Helen might be a bit late, and we'll make sure that if there's anything that comes up in that time, we'll make sure we can accept Helen's comments later if necessary. Then conflict of interest register. I just remind members to please make sure that you've got your interest register well documented, and that if there are any particular things for a meeting, make sure we hear about them. I'll turn to the minutes of the 11th of May meeting, which was chaired by Mayor Lash, who has approved the draft minutes. Can somebody comment or move that the minutes be adopted?
Ready to move those.
Thanks, Mayor Russell. Seconded by Councillor Webb. Is that okay with you, Councillor? Yes, seconded by Councillor Webb. All in favour? Aye. Thank you. Carried. Any? That's a true record. Any matters arising from those minutes you'd like to pick up at this stage? No, I don't see any on the screen. Okay. We'll move to the first, the agenda, just the agenda check. I think we've got a good agenda there, and scheduled to meet complete by about 10 o'clock. So we'll see how we get on.
Hey Rex, sorry.
Yes.
I think Greg needs to mute his thing because he's got some noise coming through. It's coming through all croaky.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not too sure how to drive this. I'm in a different age group. Yeah.
Is that better?
Maybe I could reduce the sound, but
I think it's coming through because you're listening on the screen, on the big screen, and it's creating some background noise.
I see. Yeah, I might pop this under the table and then it might change the acoustics so it doesn't, because I think it's feeding back through here system, maybe.
Okay, we'll see what you can do with that.
There it goes. It's worked now.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you. Thanks, Tony. All right, then moving to the first report, the information implication of climate change modelling in the TTPP. So to you, Jo, to introduce Chris, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Our Principal Planner, Ms. Easton's away for this meeting, so any reports of hers I will do my best to bring. But also joining us today is Chris Cameron, who's the Principal Natural Hazards Analyst at West Coast Regional Council. He's going to discuss some of the scientific side of this first paper. And this report is providing information on climate change modelling and its implications for Te Taupōtini Plan. This was what was requested by committee members following a recent media report on the scenarios for climate change. The report's in two parts. First, providing some explanation on climate change modelling scenarios, and the second will discuss the planning situation. So, Chris, I'll hand over to you to talk about that first part of the report, please. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jo, and good morning, committee members. Thanks for having me along for this session. Look, I won't add too much to the paper, which you've had the opportunity to have a look over. I'll just cover off a few things there in summary, but also a couple of points to add, and then, of course, happy to take questions that you may have. So just briefly on the scenarios or the pathways there, certainly at the time that they were developed, they were all seen as equally plausible futures And it's the same with the new set of scenarios that have been developed also. They're all seen as equally plausible. Though it's clear, even with the new scenarios that are being developed and proposed, that some of those will require some quite dramatic shifts to current practices. So this is something that I didn't mention in the paper, but some of them require a very dramatic drop in emissions, including reaching net negative emissions, which is quite a dramatic shift. So the highest SSP scenario was intentionally developed as a no policy scenario, so that the impact of policy action could be compared against a no action pathway. One thing to add there too is that the shift from the RCPs to SSPs actually increased the rate of emissions for the highest scenario. So there was not necessarily an expectation, but there was the possibility that was used in those scenario shifts more recently that emissions could continue to rise at a faster rate than was earlier thought. So as I've said in the paper, the removal of that top scenario reflects the fact that actual emissions have tracked well below that level for around a decade. So it's making it implausible that they can return to that top track. In other words, we've gone past the curve lifting at that high rate. So it can't sort of go back and achieve that. Out of interest, the low scenario has also been removed. So it's now too low to be achieved. So really it's that narrowing of the range of possibilities in terms of where emissions can track within that. So
Chris,
prior to
sorry, Chris, if I
Yep.
could just, are you there referencing figure 1? Is that what you're talking about?
just talking about some of the various points there in the report. So yeah, figure one certainly refers to the RCPs, and that's that most recent comment in terms of that we haven't tracked against either the RCP 8.5 or against that lowest scenario as well.
Yes, I just want to clarify what you meant by higher and lower, and that's
Yeah, that's right.
illustrated in figure 1. Yeah, thank you.
Illustrated in figure 1. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, carry on.
Okay, so prior to about 2016, actual emissions were above RCP 8.5, and that was widely used as the basis for determining the consequences of that worst case scenario. And as I mentioned, in terms of that, no, sorry, I don't know if you're picking up that background noise here.
No.
No, good. We've got some construction work going on here, so it's certainly quite loud in the background. So the RCP was widely used as that basis for determining that worst case trajectory. And as I mentioned, the no policy scenario. So that was taken on internationally as well as what was used here in New Zealand, and that's the MFE advice that was passed through. So obviously there's a number of factors that have contributed to the global emissions being lower than RCP 8.5. Things like COVID, global economic pressures, reduced costs for renewable energy has contributed, as well as I think reduced coal production in China. All of those factors have played something of a part. I think a key point here is that while the RCP 8.5 or the replacement SSP scenario had emissions reaching 8.5 watts per square meters by 2100, the new high scenario that replaces that has that reaching the same level by about 2125. So that translates to warming that could reach more than 5 degrees by 2150. So it's not to say that we're out of the woods and that the reduction in emissions has avoided the worst case scenario. It's just pushed that out in terms of what we're seeing with these new scenarios. So I think Joe's probably going to cover this more in her piece, but all of these changes will be looked at by the global climate science community when the new scenarios come out, and that's starting from about September this year. So those results will be looked at over the next few years, both internationally through the IPCC and here in New Zealand. So we can expect it to take a bit of time to filter through in terms of when those model runs have been fully processed and released. And I understand September this year is the sort of date that we'll start to see that coming out. And from there on, seeing the global response to that and coming through to New Zealand responses as well. So look, that's it from me. Happy to take any questions that people might have.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions to Chris Cameron on that presentation? Councillor Gibson first. Yeah.
I'm having trouble believing all this. I mean, we were terrified with all the worst case scenarios and modelled everything on it. And you said less coal uses in China. I just cannot believe that. I don't think we can plan our future on this science. It doesn't seem to be real. I mean, how come it's changed just like that since 2016? And we haven't done an awful lot in that time.
Well, what's changed is that the scenarios which were developed back before we had several decades of actual emissions. What's changed is that what's happened is that the emissions that we've seen have tracked between the highest and lowest scenarios. So bearing in mind that they are scenarios, they're not predictions of the future. They're possible pathways that emissions could have taken. And what we've seen is something that's in between the highest and lowest. And so it's within the band of possible futures that the scientists had projected. And so, that they've been accurate in that sense. It's, as mentioned in the paper there, it's a positive outcome that we haven't seen emissions at the worst case scenario.
But in New Zealand, where we live, where likes of Jackson's Bay, 1 millimetre sea rise in 100 years.
Yes, Alan, I don't think we'll get into...
No, all right, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, made me point.
Yes, made your point. Paul Madrick, you've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, thanks. I think in response to Councillor Gibson, I think what's changed is the government and the government direction on this. That's had a big play. So when we were drafting this plan, we questioned these the guidance that we were given from the government, but we had no option but to put in the high levels that were coming from the Ministry for the Environment. But I mean, this just goes to show that it waxes and wanes with the changing of the tide of the government, and so it's a different flavour now, and so here we go. But it's all theory and ideology, but it's something that has such a massive impact on a lot of the West Coast. And Jackson Bay, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but Councillor Gibson is right on that one about Jackson Bay. We've raised that one before as well, about the minuscule rise in sea level. I'm not denying climate change at all. Climate change is having an impact in various ways. However, sea level rise is another matter altogether, and it's all theory. So I think we need to be cautious. And so I think this has given us the opportunity to actually pare it back a little. So that's grand. Thank you.
Just to be clear, I'm not stopping debate, but the matter of Jackson Bay sea level rise, as you say, Paul, has been debated a number of times in the committee. Unless there's some fresh information, I don't think we need to go on to that one. But I acknowledge your right to raise the matter. Other comments on this paper, on this part so far? please.
One from me, please, Rex.
Yes, thanks, Councillor.
Doesn't specifically pertain to Jackson's Bay, but a wider interest question in the drop in the coastal hazard area from 1 metre down to 74 centimetres. There's some commentary in there around it not necessarily having any, dare I say it, wins or positive outcomes. Can I just explore that a bit further with you, Chris? A 26 centimetre or 26% reduction in that. Are we going to see any, dare I say it, wins for people who are currently not feeling they're having wins with this plan and some of the overlays we've got there?
Yeah, look, thanks for that, Ashley. And I think some of the commentary might come through, and Joe might have something to add on this. But certainly, when you start to explore the impact and the areas affected by 76 centimetre, the difference between 76 centimetres and 100 centimetres of sea level rise, the areas can be quite similar. So there's large areas affected. So there can often be step changes in terms of, when you get 50 centimetres, you'll have a significant area, affected or inundated. And beyond that, it might take quite a lot more to have another step change. So that's the sort of pattern. That's the part of the explanation for why why that comment's been included, and why, when you look at the areas, there's not a significant increase in the area that you're talking about. So yeah, I think it's a really strong point to make. It's a really important one to note, that even by a reduction that we might see down the track at some stage in terms of the sea level rise figures used, there will still be significant areas affected, and it may not be that much different from what we're talking about with the 1 metre figure.
Is that, Chris? Appreciate you clarifying that.
Thanks, Councillor Maitland. Sorry, I couldn't see that. So thanks for that note, Paul.
You're on mute, Greg. Since you moved the thing down underneath, it's gone on mute.
Yeah, I can't see or hear Councillor Maitland.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry. Yes, a question to you, Chris. The new scenario that came from the coupled model into comparison project, which was a project of the World Climate Research Program that came out recently. Have you looked at that?
Yes, I have.
And how does that scenario compare with RCP 8.5?
Yeah, look, and that sort of, I guess, reiterated one of the points I made just now, but also in the paper, was that the 8.5 refers to 8.5 watts per square metre average global additional warming, and the new high scenario reaches 8.5 watts per square metre of additional warming by around about 2125. So the current modelling had it reaching it at 2100. So it's only around 25 years beyond that it would still potentially reach that under the sort of worst case picture of that. So it is in that way it has some similarities. It doesn't rise at the same level, but it does take us to that same end result, if you like.
So considering that, would you sort of suggest that nothing needs to change with the models at the moment that are imposed on people's property?
Yeah, that would be my take on it. Obviously, we're responding to the guidance and advice from government, and that's what we've undertaken so far. So what we have in place at the moment, I would say, doesn't need to change until or unless we get that revised guidance or advice through from government.
Thank you.
Other questions to Chris Cameron at this stage? Just confirm, is Francois online? I can't pick up Francois. No. Okay, if there are no other questions, Joe, could you carry on?
Through the chair.
Yes, please. Councillor Russell.
Yeah.
Mayor Russell, yes.
Yeah, I've just got one question. I just wonder, this is all great information, and thanks very much, Chris. So in awaiting further advice to trickle through from government, is it a case perhaps that government is in catch-up mode, and we will get that advice going forward, or is what you're presenting here such that you don't anticipate that any change will come through?
Yeah, good question. So the process is such that the information that we've got at the moment is preliminary information, if you like. So the full modelling runs and outputs from the models for the new CMIP 7 haven't been done yet. So I mentioned the date of September this year, and that's when those will start to come through. So it will be beyond September as those runs come through and as the model outputs are assessed by specialists and government, that will start to really sort of filter down, and that will take some time. And some of that comes through the form of the IPC's assessment reports. And that's talked about there, that the next assessment report's due in 2028. So they're a 5-year process, and we can expect to sort of get the wider views on what that means, and the information that government will use to take into consideration when making any decisions around this at that stage.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I don't see anything further. Joe, would you like to take this paper, complete this paper?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So from point 19, just to reiterate that whatever guidance was available at the time that TTPP was being developed was the guidance. I'm not sure if that's Westland feeding back again. So what's happened with the information that's come through globally through to the central government in New Zealand, and they obviously have provided guidance and a national policy statement very recently, December last year, for natural hazards. So that's what this government has provided. And the two things that are impacted by climate change in TTPP are the flood hazard layer and the coastal hazard layer. The flood hazard layer, we've said in the report, actually didn't have any climate change scenarios included when it was developed. So under the MPS for natural hazards, these do need to be included in the next 18 months. So by the end of next year, a plan change will need to occur. If nothing's changed with the legislation, we're obliged to add a scenario in for flood hazards. So that is likely to impact more properties.
Yeah, thank you.
Whereas with the coastal hazards, we already included the scenario 8.5, the RCP, which is what's been under discussion just now. And if we get further updated legislation or guidance from the government, then it will be easy for either of these two calculations for the different scenarios to be used, to be changed in a plan change, because for the when the overlay scientific information was all run and put together, all the overlays were included in that. The committee chose not to include it in flood, but by the time we got to the coastal hazards, the obligation was there to include the 8.5. But if it did reduce to 8.4, it would be an easy matter for us just to change the mapping with the information that we've already had done, so it wouldn't require further expert intervention there. So just to say that we are always watching any spaces where there's any legislation that TTPP is obliged to implement, and that we will always bring updates to you if there's anything to update on. And just that following, I guess, variation 2, which was the coastal hazards variation, and the concerns raised by the public with that the staff would recommend and keep close eye on for any future plan changes, just making sure that our communication resources are developed that will help the public understand why things are having to happen in the planning space.
Thank you. Any questions on that summary from Joe of the effects of where we are at the moment?
Through the chair,
Yes.
It's my understanding that the SSP 7 was also eliminated from the scenario. So that would be quite a drop below the 8.5, wouldn't it?
I guess that we won't make any changes until the government tell us what they want us to do. So, you know, they'll be the ones that will be judging at what level, what the scenario would be used.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Councillor Maitland. Yep.
Thank you. Through the chair, so basically we will have to wait till after September possibly to get some sort of ruling on that.
I would imagine, just following on from what Chris Cameron was saying, that it would be at least 2028 before the IPCC would bring out their recommendations on scenarios, and that our government would take even longer than that to determine what was happening in the international community and what they would want to do in New Zealand. Is that what you were saying, Chris?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's you know, it would be difficult for New Zealand to act unilaterally without that you know, consensus in the global science community.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? I suggest that somebody move that report be noted. Moved by Mayor Russell, thank you. Seconded by, I'm sorry, I don't have all the screen. I'll second the matter. Can't see these screens. I'll put just to note the paper, all in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against, carried, thank you. I'll move on to the next paper concerning the financial implications of the mediation deferment. Back to you. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this information that I'm bringing today is on the costs of a proposed plan change that were discussed at last month's committee meeting. And we were also asked to have a look at the financial implications of the deferred mediation start date as required by the Environment Court. So I'll bring information on that. As you are fully aware, the committee is responsible for developing and approving a budget, and then that goes to the regional council to include in their financial decision making and budgeting. And staff brought a proposed 2026-27 budget to the TTPP committee in February, which was approved, and then it was amended in March and approved once again, just because it looked at that stage like we were going to have a significant number more weeks of mediation than had originally been budgeted for. We canvassed the whole idea of the difficulties of accurately budgeting, and staff determined to bring back any issues that they felt would significantly impact on the 2027 budget to you. And then at last month's meeting, it was noted that the deferment of the mediation meetings by 2 months was going to have an impact on the 2027 and the 2026 budgets. by actually deferring some of the costs that we thought were going to fall in 2026 to 2027. So at the same time, the plan change paper, now variation 3, was bought, and there was a request to identify the costs of a plan change of that size, and also that brought up the point of clause 13.2 in the Order in Council, and you asked for a little bit of more information about who's responsible for funding plan changes. So I will just quickly cover off that Order in Council because that sort of underpins some of the further discussion. And if you have a look at clause 13.2, it says, "To time OD Plan Committee may agree that the relevant West Coast District Council or councils or their district or districts is to be responsible for funding work relating to a particular amendment to the combined district plan, which will have only or predominantly a localised impact." So that was the clause that was being referred to. Does anyone have any questions on that part of the Order in Council? Okay, so then I've just given a background on the different ways that plans can be funded. So you all understand that plan changes are a normal part of maintaining an up-to-date plan. For us, when the TTPP committee initiates plan change, it's going to be because there are some errors that need amending that are more than minor, or to improve implementation when particularly district council staff and users of the plan have found things are less than optimal, and causing more people to need resource consents is just generally the reason why implementation is felt to be suboptimal. And then part of a rolling plan review that would happen over 10 years, so that every part of the plan would be looked at, so it never gets to the stage where the whole thing has to be done all at once again. So those are the reasons that TTPP itself, the committee, would initiate a plan change, and in that case then the funding would be required through the regional rate raised by West Coast Regional Council. Any other party, which includes the district councils, can bring a private plan change on a matter of interest to them, but that would be at that party's expense. I just thought I'd note that under clause 25 of the RMA, there is this ability, which is usually upheld, to deny a plan change within the first 2 years of a plan becoming operative, just to embed a new plan and give it a chance to work and see what the real issues are. Now, as part of the plan review process, the part of the Order in Council that I've just read enables the district council to request particular amendments which have only or predominantly this localised impact, and they can be considered alongside region-wide amendments, which is what the TTPP would be bringing and funding through the regional rate. So funding for those matters may be the responsibility of the individual council, but overall costs to them would be reduced because all these matters would be being heard at once. So if that happened, then the cost of the individual parties would be for kind of additional matters that would have to happen in a hearing that wouldn't have happened without their matters being raised. And that would be things like any additional hearing days that are required. It could be a big thing and it's going to take 2 days out of a 5-day hearing. If you wanted the hearing in a different location, or definitely any costs for the planning, the legal advice, technical beyond that individual. Is there any questions on how the different options of funding and ways of making plan changes before I move on?
I don't see any, Joe. I think it's a straightforward explanation. Thanks. Thank you.
So this was something that was requested. How much is a plan change or variation going to cost? Now, keeping in mind that this would be considered only a small plan change with individual matters not being of huge import, but overall combining to make things more difficult for usability of the plan. it's normal practice at this sort of small scale for a plan change variation to be heard just by one commissioner, and if there's only one commissioner, that commissioner must be an accredited chair. And it's normal practice at other councils for an elected representative of council to act as this commissioner, and we're very fortunate that Councillor Webb actually is a commissioner with a chair certificate and has confirmed that she would be happy to hear some of these small variations. So that would limit the amount of expense for the committee. And we've anticipated that something like this small plan change might take 5 to 7 days for preparation ahead of the hearing, and then the report writing afterwards. What I've done is just provided a table with an estimate of what a budget for this small plan change might be, and that would be between about $30,000 and $35,000. You can see all the different parts that make that up, and I'm happy to take any questions on that.
I don't see any questions. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, so deferment is quite a different matter altogether. We are working very closely with our legal counsel every day, I would say, during this appeals process. They play a really important part for us. And the sort of things they do is they're constantly liaising and corresponding with the Environment Court and with all of the parties involved in the appeal. And there are, over 30 parties to be working with. On the matter of deferment itself, this was a result, to start with, of the Royal Forest and Bird Protection Society putting in an application to strike out the appeals and Section 274 notices by Graham Buller on the TTPP. So, and having to respond to the application, they've written an affidavit for Rex and made legal filings, and I've been quite involved with conversations with them and oversight and administration. And we would say that the deferment, the issue of having to deal with this application has been over $11,000 worth of expenses to the TTPP committee, even though it was between two different parties. As a consequence of the forest and bird application, and then also the mineral companies agreeing that there should be a deferment and putting in a memo to the court did decide to defer mediation by 2 months. And that's required a lot of work in helping reschedule the timing of it, and all sorts of legal cost drafting memos and the like. So the cost of that alone, just responding, has been over $7,000. The main issue for me, though, that arises from the deferment is the costs anticipated for mediation that we thought was going to occur in this financial year will now fall in the 2027 financial year, which will increase any budgeted exceedance that we've already anticipated that there'll be budget exceedances, because the process just is out of our hands. So the second table shows you this, that 3 weeks of mediation that we'd anticipated would fall in this current financial year are now going to fall in the next financial year, and that we anticipate that the costs for that mean moving about $124,000 worth of costs into next financial year. So that will just increase the budget exceedance then. So that's to be anticipated ahead of time. Any questions on that, or was that quite clear?
I think sadly it's quite clear. Any questions or comments from others?
Joe, so will the regional council just carry forward the unspent funds because mediation didn't happen in this financial year to next financial year to help with that.
Daryl?
Yeah.
That usually doesn't happen, but yeah.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Just a few comments, if I could, just on this paper, and then I'll address your question. Thanks, Joe. Firstly, I think you've all heard about specific plan changes in a district, or perhaps even 2 districts and not the 3rd district, and that the costs would lie in the district that they fall, rather than being generally rated across the targeted rate by the regional council. What I would comment there is that I think you're already starting to think about and know some very specific plan changes. I'm thinking about a zoning change in Reefton by Buller District Council. In that case, I would urge the CEOs and then up to the governance, the councillors, to start including those sorts of costs in the year that you want to bring those plan changes within your LTPs, because these are not small budget items, and you'll need to make a financial provision for that. And if you would like to talk to Joe and Lois about what sort of quantums you might want to put in as estimates for that, then please do so. In terms of now the overall rating and financial picture with the TTPP, so my commentary is that in the very early years going back to 2020, the rating by the regional council across the targeted rate across the whole of the West Coast was covering its initial costs of expenditure, and so there was no need, there was no deficit and no need to loan fund. Since that time, and of course specifically over the last 18 months, 2 years, the costs and expenditure with the hearings and all the experts and that sort of thing have been exceeding the rating per year that has been rated, and we're internally debt funding that at the moment, and have been doing for the last few years to cover those costs. We've also been internally borrowing on the on that would have to be accrued on that borrowing as well. We're about to, in the next, on the 23rd of this month, consider what a loan term and what the borrowing situation for the TTPP should be going forward. So the intent was that the TTP would cost 5 million, and we understand how spurious that number was. It wasn't founded in anything. It was just a sort of throwaway comment, not founded, but somehow, well before my time, that number got put into the regional council budget as the budget, and then loaned over 10 years. The loan period over 10 years was statutorily based on the fact that in the RMA, the plan has a life of 10 years. So hence the borrowing life of the loan. As we know, we haven't even got to operative stage yet. And so the regional council will need to consider what the loan term is for the expenditure, which is now, as we all know, well past the 5 million. So all of those matters are regional council jurisdictional matters of how to pay and loan fund this, and that will be considered on the 23rd. And yes, all these costs are just being carried over, Joe, and handled by us at the moment. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks for raising that point, Joe. Any other questions or comments on Joe Armstrong's report? I don't see any others, so I think somebody moved that the report be received. Moved by...
Certainly from me.
Thank you. Is that Councillor Casson, was it? Okay, thank you. Yeah. Good. Seconded by Mayor Russell, or brushing his hair. I wasn't sure, Chris, but anyway, you've seconded that. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Move on to the next report, which is concerning variation 3, the update on that. Thank you again, Joe Armstrong.
Certainly, thank you. This report's just updating developments on variation 3, as Lois writes, formerly Plan Change 1. intended to address inefficient outcomes and unworkable provisions. The variation has been drafted and submitted to the Minister for RMA Reform, and this update was brought to this committee meeting in May. And while the information was received at that meeting, the substantive matter of progressing the variation, subject to approval, wasn't addressed at the meeting. So that's what we're looking for today, is to actually get some approval to move it forward with the variation once approval is received. Staff at the 3 district councils actually have identified matters that were ideally included in the variation, and as has already been discussed briefly this morning, Buller District Council has asked for the rezoning of that 13 hectares at Butts Road for residential development. Apart from that, all the rest of them are region-wide issues that are trying to be dealt with. The proposal was submitted to the Ministry for the Environment, and they told us it was going to go before the Minister for RMA Reform in early May, and I heard from them this week that today they're planning to put it before the Minister, so we may get a approval from him during June to say yes, that we can go ahead with the variation. But because we're under plan stop at the moment, we still need that approval before we can move any further. What we're seeking in this paper is just that you would say, if we get approval, then you can go ahead and start looking at consulting on it. Summary of the variations in Appendix 1. Nothing has changed since you were given this in May as far as the appendix is concerned. Just please do note that there are 7 matters in the draft variation which relate to appeals that have been put on the plan by one or more members, district council members of the TTPP. So we might not need to, if they are heard in mediation and resolved through mediation, then they wouldn't need to be part of the variation. So things may still change due to the mediation schedule. Once we've got RMA approval and your approval to go ahead, then there needs to be statutory consultation, and that's what we're really looking for approval of today, that if we get Minister approval, we can go ahead, and these people listed at point 18 all need to be informed that a variation is underway and given the opportunity to submit. So we'd send them a letter and a copy of the variation showing where all the changes are, and give them a month or 6 weeks to respond. I can't confirm this time frame. If we hear from the Minister this month, then hopefully consultation could be finished by the end of July, and then a report asking to publicly notify the variation could come as early as the August committee meeting, but Lois will not be attending that meeting either, so it might be October before we can get it underway anyway. When I was saying that some matters that are in the variation are also under consideration in the appeals, they cover things like the site coverage issue, light and noise matters, and some natural hazards issues. And these are going to be heard around about the dates that are at point 22 there. So we could find that either they don't need to be heard because a variation has occurred, or a variation doesn't need to include them because decisions and agreements have been made. The same as what we're asking for in the variation could happen at mediation. So just letting you know that we will keep everyone who has an appeal on anything that's in the variation informed of the fact that we're also pursuing a variation if we go ahead with that. Are there any questions on that?
Just one from me, Joe, just concerning the timing. I think it's important that we keep this moving as fast as we can, or as fast as other circumstances will permit. Could you
I
just
guess that the importance of keeping it moving is that at the moment it's costing users time and money.
Exactly.
They're having to get resource consents that were unanticipated when the plan was written, and being able to undertake the variation and get that through means that it will be less onerous for plan users.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that that the matter should be held up just simply by the timetable of these committee meetings. I think if necessary, we would hold a special meeting between scheduled meetings just to keep the thing moving. I'd be interested in the views of other members of the committee on that one. I don't see
Totally
any
agree with that approach, Chair.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we'll just bear that in mind, Joe, if something else comes along. If there are no other questions, I'd like to move back then to the three recommendations on page 20. These are much more formal recommendations than earlier papers. Everyone familiar with those three recommendations? Somebody move that the committee adopts those. Moved by by Paul Medrick. Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Gibson. Thank you very much. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. The next paper was I've lost the agenda.
Mediation update.
Thank you. Mediation update. Thank you very much.
Now,
This is on page 29, the
yes.
appeal mediation hearing process update. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. This is prepared by legal counsel every month because they're having all these direct discussions and dealings with the court. So I'll start at point 3, position setting. After the 11th of May committee meeting, a position subcommittee meeting was held, and the 7 topics noted there were positions were set for all of those. There have been a couple more appeals resolved during this last month. They're not complete appeals, it's just some appeals points within appeals that we felt could be dealt with individually and ahead of the mediation process, so it didn't draw that process out any longer than necessary. So that was with Birchfield Coal Mines and Royal Forest and Bird. They've withdrawn some points, and there are still ongoing discussions with the people listed under 4B. In addition to these withdrawals, there are also appeal points that have been refined and clarified. Some people would put in appeals that said, I don't like this, or remove this, or they'd be talking about a certain chapter and they'd say, and this is no good here, but whatever this was, this wording or something could occur throughout the whole plan. So it was unclear exactly if they wanted it removed from the whole plan or what the appeal was asking for. So the lawyers wrote to, your counsel wrote to everyone where they wanted some clarification on their appeals points and asked for further particulars on those. We didn't get all the further particulars that we'd hoped for, so counsel appealed to the court to tell everyone that we needed further particulars, and they agreed with that, and they had to provide them to us and to the court by the 8th of May, and all but one party, which was Groundswell New Zealand, provided that information on the 8th of May. So that has been very helpful, and it's enabled a lot more pre-discussions to occur, actually understanding exactly what they're after, because it could actually easily meet in some cases with what the committee's position was. So we've also sought some expert advice to help resolve some landscape and hazard mapping appeals on a number of properties through direct discussion. So there are some costs involved in all of this, but it's balanced off by the likelihood of resolving some of the issues ahead of mediation. And also in the case of particularly one land developer for quite a big development. The costs will be borne by that developer. In mediation, this strikeout application from Forest and Bird that we've discussed actually went to court on the 22nd of May, and both parties were represented in the court, and the judge has reserved his decision. So we're hoping that we'll get a decision on that by the end of this month before mediations start. Also, we, the Council for TTPP, made an application to strike out one of the appeals against TTPP by Mr. Curry, and the application was successful because it was struck out due to a failure for Mr. Curry to make a valid submission on the plan in the first place. Now, the groundswell matter that I noted just before, when they didn't provide us further information by the 8th of May, that has since come in because counsel for the TTPP have filed with the court to take them to court on their issue, and groundswell said no, they would provide us with the further particulars, and that's come through. So staff's just assessing the information that's come through to determine what their next steps will be on that. Going back to this mediation that I skipped, when the application came through to defer mediation by 2 months, that would take us into July before we could start any of the mediation meetings. And so our council made application to the court to be able to begin mediation on the 30th of June. So instead of having 4 weeks of mediation moved, only 3 were. So that's just providing us with the ability to put all those 3 weeks back, and was going to be easier than 4, and there's less upset and upheaval for all parties involved. So the first mediation will be starting on 5 small matters on the 30th of June. I must say that at this stage, we do not know what the venue is or what times of day or when that will happen, because that's the sort of information that the court provides, and we'll probably only know that information 7 to 10 days before any mediation starts. So that's the sort of that's all completely up to the court, and we have no control over that. Now, just quickly to Appendix 1, you'll see that all points that have been withdrawn are in this table, and where there's any blue text, that just shows that that has happened in this last month. Things in black happened previous to that. So if you have any questions on this paper at all, I'll try my best to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions? I think others will be thinking like me that it's disconcerting that the Environment Court can't get organised to the extent that we only get, or not we, but people involved only get a week or 10 days notice of timing and location of mediation discussions. Unfortunate, I think. But any other questions or comments? No. Someone moved that the paper be received. I think Mayor Gibson, is it your turn? Thank you. No. Somebody to second that. I think it's yes. Councillor Webb, all in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Turning then to the financial report to the 30th of April. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. I'll largely take this as read. It's a fairly standard report, just noting that West Coast Regional Council has provided some information at point 6, and then happy to take any questions on the paper or the tables.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions? There are no questions. Could somebody move the report be received?
Helen?
Moved by Mayor Russell. Thank you. I'll second that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. I think that completes the agenda. Joe, could you just explain the future meeting schedule, please?
The next meeting is due for the 11th of August. Lois will still be away at that time, but if we get approval for the variation, then Doug Bray, our senior policy planner, can help write a notification. We've got a lot of information available for that. Then on the 17th of September, there was originally going to be a committee meeting, but we're going to be in mediations that week, but we'll pop out for a final position subcommittee meeting just on the last 4 topics that haven't gone through yet. Otherwise it's monthly. So we don't have a July meeting due to mediation schedules as well. So that's why August is the next one.
Yeah. So, sorry, could you just go back to September? Will there be a committee meeting?
No, not in September.
Not at this stage, but there will be a subcommittee meeting.
That's right.
Yes, correct. Thank you. Good. Any questions or comments on that timetable? We all understand that? Okay, if there's no other business, I'll close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.